I am Liz Barnes. I'm an assistant professor of biology at Middle Tennessee State University. So I am very interested in the way that we teach college biology students about evolution and how we can teach evolution in a way that doesn't make them think that they have to choose between their faith and accepting evolution. So then once I have understood the context of how instructors are teaching and how students are responding to those different kinds of instruction, I then build theoretical frameworks as well as instructional practices that can be implemented and then tested to see whether or not they're effective. So for instance, one thing that we identified in my research is that almost half of students in college biology classes think that you have to be an atheist in order to accept evolution. So we then created an intervention where we explained to students the bounded nature of science and how science is actually more technically agnostic rather than atheistic. In fact, a lot of people don't know that it was an evolutionary biologist that actually coined the term agnostic, specifically to describe what science was. Right? And then by doing that, we show that we're able to reduce their perceived conflict between religion and evolution and change that conception that actually they can still hold their own faith and accept evolution. I implement this in my own class every single semester, right? Now, in terms of research, what we're doing is we've gotten to the point that the intervention that we've created has evidence both qualitatively through interviewing students who say that it's been impactful, but we've also conducted randomized controlled studies, right, where we've given the intervention to a group of students and then a control to another group of students and shown that it has a positive impact on their perceived compatibility between religion and evolution. So now that we've accumulated that evidence, it's more about changing the intervention to be more effective for different groups of students, right? So for instance, what we see is that there are inequities in terms of attitudes towards science among more dominant racial groups in the sciences than more minoritized racial groups in the sciences. So in the United States, it's quite variable what exposure students will have had to evolution by the time they get to college. So in some regions of the United States, right, like in the West, evolution is usually incorporated in the K through 12 environment, and they come to college with more exposure to evolution. My next steps in my research are really trying to teach the next generation of scientists how to be more culturally competent communicators about topics like evolution. So in the last 10 years, I've really honed in on this idea that scientists themselves, as a secular community in the United States, we really have to grapple with how we're going to be competent communicators to a majority religious public, right? And one way I can see to make that change long term is through teaching my current students how to be culturally competent communicators, because they're going to be the next generation of scientists. So, in addition to teaching them about the compatibility between religion and evolution, I'm now starting to test interventions and do studies to explore how do we teach them how they can communicate to others in a way that is going to reduce tension and reduce conflict rather than unnecessarily inflate conflict and tension. So we've started to test single class interventions where we teach students about, what are science communication principles that are effective and what communication principles are ineffective. So for instance, scientists historically have been known to use what we call the deficit approach in science communication. So they think, we're the authority that has the facts, and if we just transmit these facts to other people, that's what they need to understand and, accept science. But really what we're finding is that more effective communication is more of a dialogue approach, right? So we work to understand the other person and where they're coming from before we seek for them to understand our own point of view. And so we teach them a little bit about what is the deficit approach, what is the dialogue approach, and we also teach them about how they can be boundary spanners in their own communities. So for instance, if they belong to a Christian community or a Muslim community or a politically conservative community, these are all communities in which they can use their college education in science to be boundary spanners on topics for which there might be controversy.